We cannot allow ourselves to believe that genetics is what's running here. Because just because my dad had lymphoma and because my mom had breast cancer, that, oh my God, I'm going to be next. It doesn't work that way, guys. It only works that way if we believe in it.
Exactly.
And our beliefs can be so powerful that we will manifest that. For instance, my mom believed everything the doctors told her, everything. And the doctors told her, you have 2 months, maybe 2 months to live. And she was dead. Guess what? In 2 months, almost to the day.
That's why I say prognosis is like such a vicious cycle, because people believe it. And guess what happens? Welcome to the Life is a Healing Journey podcast by yours truly, Anuschka, with a C. This podcast explores how you can create a true healthy lifestyle and live your life to the fullest in the face of any circumstance by healing and balancing your mind, body, spirit. If you are someone that's been dealing with disharmony in any area of your life and you are committed to seeking harmony, this podcast is for you. Let's start healing. On today's podcast, we have a guest, Karen McKy, who is an international certified PSYCH-K instructor. And that's how we met last year. I can't believe it's been a year, Karen. Oh, I know, right? Having traveled a great deal within the world, she loves teaching at most at home in Denver, Colorado, my hometown as well, right? Which is, again, not a coincidence. Karen has been teaching full-time since 2010 and loves watching the participants in the workshops magically transform their lives using the processes she teaches and the one-on-ones, right? The private, we just talked about how rewarding it is when we work with people one-on-one. These lifelong tools can be used every day to correct the limitations we believe about ourselves. And I'm truly honored to have you on Life is a Healing Journey today, because I absolutely love PSYCH-K and I always talk about it on my podcast. So it's really an honor to have you here with us, Karen. So please fill us in if there's anything else that I missed.
Oh, no, you did a great job. Awesome. It's a wonderful introduction. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. So we're here today to talk about awakenings and what different incidences. Some people have one incident, some people have multiples, right? And it wakes us up. It wakes us up from this autopilot, automatic way of living. And so I would love to hear yours. I know you've had several, so please share with us.
Yeah, thank you, Anuschka. Well, and feel free to jump in anytime. I was just, when you asked me to join you on a podcast and gave me the overall setting of what you'd like to deal with, I was like, oh my gosh, well, I've probably had one really big awakening, and then I started thinking about it and I realized, hang on a minute, I have had a lot of awakenings as I've been going on. And as I was telling you, outside of it, my first awakening actually happened when I was about 4 years old. And I was under the care of a lovely, beautiful woman that I called Nanny, but her birth name was Grace. And she was all of that. She was this amazing, grace-filled woman. And so I had gone up the street one day that she was caring for me, and she was watching, of course, to go say hello to another little girl and ask her to play. And I came running back down the street, just so upset and crying. And I don't know exactly what she said at this point in time, but basically she didn't want to play with me. And I was so angry. I said, I hate her. And Nanny got down on her knees, and this was outside in her little backyard because she had this very small little backyard. And she got on her knees. And so this is a very, an older woman. She was probably, well, oh my God, I'm about her age now. Wait a minute, I'm going to retract that. Anyway,
well, it's what we think as a kid, right?
Yeah, I know, it's so true. But she, back in those days, they seemed so much older because they had the tight, curly purple hair and stuff. Well, anyway, she got down on her knees and she just looked at me eye to eye and she said, "Oh, Karen, we must never hate anyone." And I remember that moment, and it was such a poignant moment, Anuschka, because that has followed me my entire life. And anytime I get frustrated or upset about anybody, that's where I go. I go back to that. I must never hate anyone. And so that's been a guiding principle that she instilled in me. So I really consider that probably my first awakening moment, because it landed, and it became a principle that I lived my life from. Not that long after that, my brother had been born and we ended up leaving Wichita, Kansas, which is where that whole scenario took place. And right after my 6th birthday, we moved to Colorado, and we were leaving one set of grandparents there that were adoring and wonderful and incredible, and then coming to Colorado, where it was a totally different experience. But we moved to Colorado, and that was a huge shift in my life. And I was thinking about, gee, what did I learn about that time period in my life? And it was probably my most stubborn and resistant period in my life, where I felt like I hated everything. And I know, back to hate, right? But maybe hate's too strong. But I didn't like what situation I'd been put in. And I didn't like being away from these other grandparents in Kansas that truly enjoyed me and adored me and wanted to be with me, compared to these other family members. And then I had a hard time getting involved in school, blah, 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 which led me into junior high, which was when I really feel like I had my next big awakening, because I had whatever it was. So 1st grade through 8th grade, really. So that'd be a good 7 to 8 years where I just never felt like I fit in. I didn't belong. I was an oddball. Nobody liked me. Nobody would ask me to join on the sports teams. I was always the last one chosen in gym class. It's like, for whatever sport it was, nobody wanted me to be on their team. And it was really demoralizing. It was really, really hard. And so this was kind of what I would call the most trying, well, maybe at that point, it was the most trying period of my life. Yeah. Yeah. And so that's where I developed a lot of my limitations, is during that really challenging period that I didn't belong, I didn't fit in, nobody wanted me, nobody loved me, nobody liked me, blah, 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 blah. And that's how I lived my life, because guess what? That was my belief system. So I ended up realizing that this just isn't any fun. And in 8th grade, I was at a tipping point, and I thought, you know what? I could easily get into drugs, but my fear of doing that kept me from doing it. But there was this other girl named Trish, and Trish was what I call my lifesaver. She showed up and she needed help herself one day, and she was Miss Popularity. She was like, everybody adored her. I was like, oh my God, if you have Trish for a friend, oh my God, how wonderful could that be? And one day she came to me and she said, "May I borrow your coat?" And I said, sure. And she said, "I need to walk home. I need to get home really quick." And I was like, okay. And she goes, "I started my period." And she had on white pants, as you can imagine. What a great day for her, right?
Oh my God.
And she didn't live that far from home, but I hadn't blossomed yet. And I was like, oh my God, that's got to be scary. So anyway, I let her have my coat, which she tied around her waist. And then she got permission to leave the school and go home and change and then come back. And that kind of opened up an opportunity for me who was not Miss Popular at all, to have this new experience. And Trish said, "Would you like to walk home with me someday and, study?" Because I was having a hard time. I was failing classes, or at least D's at that point. And so that opened up a whole new doorway, and she gave me hope. She gave me this opportunity to feel like, wow, maybe somebody could like me, and maybe I could have a friend. And that changed my life. She actually changed my life, because I started studying her and I started watching what it was that she did to make friends. And so I wouldn't call it there was one defining moment in that whole thing, but it was about me opening up to the possibility that I could have one friend, at least enough of a friend that that I could watch and I could learn from. And so I studied everything she did. And then I started trying it out too. And before I knew it, by the end of my 9th grade year, I had developed people that we were all in a circle. We all ran around together and I had fun. It was like, wow, okay, this is great. So she was super important in my life. And I really wanted to figure out how to make my life even better. And there was another lady, a young woman in she was a year ahead of me. And I think by this time, it was my junior year of high school. And her name was Shelly. And Shelly said, "You love to sing, don't you?" Because we were in choirs together in the high school. And she goes, "Have you ever thought about joining a church choir?" And I said, "Well, I don't really go to church all that much. It doesn't really give me all that much." And she's like, "Well, but if you could be in a choir and just sing, would that be of interest to you?" And I was like, "Actually, that would really be wonderful because I love all the choral parts and the tight harmonies and all those fun things. And my mom and dad were both musicians, and I really wasn't interested in like instruments. I was interested in singing." And so she said, "Well, why don't you come to this Methodist church that I go to, because they have this really cool youth choir and we perform it was like once a month." And I said, "Okay, I'll come check it out and see what it's all about." So by this time I'd studied Trish, I figured out how to make friends. And I truly had a life-defining moment. I had my driver's license at that point. I drove myself down to this church, and I remember pulling into the parking lot, and I went into the first set of doors, and there was this smell of limestone. And I was like, "Oh my God, this is like being back at my grandmother and grandfather's church in Wichita, Kansas." That smell was so like familiar.
Yeah,
And
nostalgic, probably.
yeah, yeah. So Shelly says, "Well, you go down the staircase, and at the bottom of the staircase, you'll see the door. The practice room door is always closed because we don't try to disrupt other people, but just, open the door and come on in. And I'll be watching for you. We'll probably be practicing, but go ahead and come on in, and then I'll introduce you." And so I went down the staircase, and I remember putting my hand on that doorknob and thinking, I can be anyone I want to be. Nobody in here but Shelly knows me, and she's on my side. I can be anyone I want to be. And I thought, okay, here's all the lessons that, Trish and I had, worked through. I had acquired from her being in my life. And I turned that doorknob and I opened the door and I was smiling, and I walked in and I said, "Hello, everybody." And everybody, kind of stopped their practice, and they all turned around and looked, and some of the people waved, to welcome me. And then Shelly came down and she's like, "I want to introduce blah, blah, blah." And so that was like a whole new opportunity. My life I felt like it opened up to me in my junior year. And so I got to go on 2 different tour choirs with this group, et cetera. And it was amazing. So that was a life-defining moment. Yeah. I don't know if you've ever had a thing like that happen for you, but it was like the application of the knowledge and the manifestation
Yeah,
of that knowledge.
Absolutely.
In that moment, it was just astounding.
So for me, just to say, I also, when you said the whole "I don't belong, I'm different," all that, I moved here when I was 7, to the States from Germany when I was 7. Wow. And so it was very much that, where it's like, I didn't know anyone, I didn't speak the language, I was in ESL, all these things. So I grew up with this, I don't belong, or I'm different. And I wasn't like the regular girl. I was very tom girl. I loved playing all the sports and all the things. So then I didn't have any really girlfriends. And then the guys were always like, "She's a girl," right? So I totally understand it. And then I remember college was that time for me. I finally went to CU Boulder my first year, and I met a bunch of Persians. And then something I feel like I was able to be myself in a way.
Yeah.
And I was able to just step into just that part of me and just be outspoken and really take on this leadership role, right? That I was not doing my entire time after, from probably 7th grade up until senior year. Because it was always I don't belong, I don't belong, I don't belong. Right.
And what a painful time. I mean, that's such a painful time because we're going through all of our chemical changes in our bodies and trying to navigate boyfriend and girlfriend relationships or whatever we're doing, and it's just like so much confusion. So
Oh my, one thing I'll say though, one thing I've learned, because I moved around a lot, like, so it was like all over the place, even went to Iran for 7th grade and came back to another school and then another high school. But I'm now a chameleon. And so
yeah,
I'm sure you are too, where you
I
really
am.
can connect with anyone. It might have been hard during that time. And I
Yeah.
feel like it's what creates, like, it's those adversities that create this version of us to be able to connect with anyone, really. So
Yeah, and that's a beautiful word. I love chameleon because that's exactly how I feel. I can go into any group now, and I can always find something to connect with a person on. And what I learned about that was not to go in and say, well, this is who I am, but I'll say, tell me a little bit about yourself, and I ask them. That was one of the things Trish taught me. It's like, ask people about themselves. They want to tell you. And so it's not about me, it's about them. And that's how I roll. It's so easy now to connect with other people because they tell me about themselves. And in that, I'll find something that I have something that I know, and it's like, oh, I can, just like you did with me. It's like, oh, I didn't feel like I belonged either.
yeah, the relatability, right? It's huge.
Exactly.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. And the more people I've met in the world over the years, it's like, we're so much more similar than we are different. All of us have things that have happened in our lives that connect us, and we can meet each other on that, playing field together.
Yeah. Focusing on that.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Well, so then my next turning point, my next wake up time was when I met my first husband, and we were in counseling because he was a counselor and I was a psychology major. And so I was like, okay, this is going to be great. I'm going to learn so much about everything from that perspective. And we were 17 years later, still in counseling, and we were going every other week usually. And it was always something was wrong, and I was taking it on all the time that it was my fault. And so it wasn't pleasant at that point. We had 2 beautiful children, and I was also feeling like I was raising the kids alone because he got out of the counseling world and went into a different industry. And with all of his extra studies, he would come home after a long day of work and then just disappear into the bedroom to go study. And I was raising these children all by myself. I was like, this isn't what I signed up for, and we were both very unhappy. And I said, is this really what we want? So this was another awakening time of me going into understand myself. It's like, I can't do this anymore. I just can't do this anymore. Not like this. And I was hesitant to go into a divorce, but it was like, just can't do it. And so I asked him one day if he was happy, and he said he was not. And I said, I'm not happy either. And I would rather that we share our children and model that, for them, and that they can create a good life. And so I think we should go our separate ways. And we both ended up agreeing that would be the best thing. He went to bed that night, slept harder and more soundly than he had slept in months. And I stayed up the whole night and cried because I was grieving the death of our relationship. And then that next morning, I woke up out on the couch, and I had only had a couple of hours of sleep. And it was like I had turned a page. It had died. The relationship had died. It was dead, and it was over. And I was like, okay, pull myself up and move forward. So what's the next step? And I moved out of the bedroom and went downstairs because I didn't have anywhere else to go. And it was a series of steps then to unravel that relationship, which we did. And we have remained friends all these years since then. So it's been that awakening for me was that I can really be okay, that I'm okay at who I am. I don't have to model myself to be somebody for anybody else, and not change my life to fit somebody else's desires or needs. It was like I was always trying to fit into what he thought I should be, and it just wasn't working. So that was my big takeaway from that waking up point. It took 17 years for me to get there, but I did it.
But it's tough when you have 2 kids and you're, it's like, what am I going to do? I mean, my mom, like, it was for a long time, she wouldn't get a divorce, to the point where I told her, like, what are you doing? Like, I was 14 years old and I said, you need to get a divorce. And she literally, like, that's what it took that for her to finally say, okay. Because it's tough being a single mother of not just 1, but 2.
Right.
It was
Very
courageous.
tough.
Very courageous of you.
It was really courageous. And I might say maybe stupid, but because the stupid part was I didn't get an attorney and I didn't have anybody helping me. So I ended up shafting myself is what I did because I was of the mindset. It's like, well, I can do this, but I'd been a stay-at-home mom for 9 years and I didn't really have much of a career ahead of that. Because I got married at 21 and I hadn't really put down any, firm roots. I hadn't really figured out how to navigate in the business world. And I wasn't working when the kids were little. I was doing all the fun things, doing Girl Scouts with my daughter and doing Boy Scouts with my son and trying to, just trying to do things that were more helpful to them. But I didn't prepare for this. And so I ended up taking an $8 an hour job. And I stupidly thought I can manage this, and my husband said, I'll provide money for you for a couple of years to help. And then you feel like you can do it on your own. And I'm like, yep, I can do it on my own after that. And that was the stupidest part of the whole thing is that I didn't have the backing, from my own skill level and a career that I could fall on. So that was another big wake up moment too, actually, that I overestimated my financial ability and I didn't get the help that I needed and deserved because I built a career for him and he is very well off today, and that wasn't honored. None of that really came my way that needed to. So I ended up going to another rescue route. I went to get another marriage and I was looking for the white knight and I found a white knight and he wanted to be that. And I was the damsel in distress and off we went down that merry little road. And so did that for 8 years. And that was really tough because at the end of that time period, he ended up having a relationship with another woman that he had previously and had been with previously to me. And in fact, it was his first wife. So that was tough because I didn't know how to do that before. I didn't know how to manage betrayal like that. And I literally felt entirely betrayed. And my standards were very much, how dare you, and I will not stand for this. But I didn't know what to do because here I am again at this pivot point, with a relationship. Well, at this point, I had built a business with him and I was running that business. And he was like out in the field doing work for the business, but I was in the office handling all the business aspects. So we built this business together. So now we had to divide a home and a business. And that took some doing. But out of that whole thing is that I realized that, you know what, I'm worth taking care of myself and I have to take care of myself. I've got to do that. So I did. And I started pursuing hypnotherapy. Before I knew that this was going on, I had started pursuing hypnotherapy and I was really starting to follow my dreams. It's like I felt this pull into spirituality many times and I kind of stuffed it down, and psychology and stuffed it down. And so it's like, all right, I'm going to follow this. And I was drawn to hypnotherapy. And I went to North Carolina to study. And it was just before I went to North Carolina that he laid the big bomb on me. And I'm like, okay, I'm coming back home after this class in January. And what am I going to do about this? So I started my little hypnotherapy practice after the very first class. And then that was the thing that got me rolling down that new pathway. And this is where I really felt like spirit had stepped in and really helped me start guiding my life in a spiritual, well, I was always living a spiritual path, but I didn't recognize I was living a spiritual path. This is where I recognized that I was. And then shortly after that, the instructor for the hypnotherapy class was a gentleman 23 years older than me. And we hit it off. And the whole thing was happening with this divorce and the second divorce. And I went back to do another class and like, oh my God, he was in my life. He was in my life. And so we started talking more and developing a relationship. And then before long, I knew that I needed to be with him. And so the divorce was finalized and we ended up going down that pathway and we were married a few months later. And that was a huge adventure in and of itself. Also, during this whole time, my grandmother and my grandfather died, the folks in Kansas. And that was really hard too, because I wasn't emotionally ready. Like, that was my biggest fear. I won't be emotionally ready. And when I was with my grandmother for her dying days, which was a 16-day period, she literally just quit eating and drinking, and she just withered away. And I was there with her every step of that way, except for the actual moment of her transition. And I realized that I had been given the gift of that strength, and that I was given the gift of that opportunity to create closure with her. The most important person in my life was her until that point. And, she'd been there with me from the very beginning, and here I am with her at her end. So I knew that I had the strength and that I was emotionally ready for her death when that happened. And that was another big turning point, because I'd been so fearful of that whole time. So in this mix now is the death of my father. He had a 10-year battle with lymphoma, and that ended up metastasizing into a colon cancer thing as well. So he died. 13 months later, my mom died from breast cancer that metastasized into brain cancer. It was just like my whole world was falling apart. But the person that was holding me, together was this new man, Jim, the man that was actually the same age as my parents. And it was a weird kind of a thing. My dad loved Jim, and my dad's name was Jim. So I have these two men that are both named Jim. And it was like they were best buddies. And my mom was on the opposite side of the spectrum. It's like, how would you ever want to be with a man, the age of your father and all this kind of stuff? And she just had all this vile contempt for him, which ended up spilling over into her relationship with me as well. And she couldn't understand any of that. And because of all of that, and because I was in the world of PSYCH-K and I was following the spiritual path, my mother and my brother, actually, it was my brother who ended up twisting my mom's mind around and telling her that what I was doing was unacceptable in his Christian eyes, and that my grandmother and my grandfather would never want any of their money to go to me. So he twisted my mom and got her to also betray me. And the funds that my grandparents had set aside for both my brother and myself after my mother's death were divided incredibly unequally, just say that. And my brother walked away with a lot of money. And so we had this huge rift that has happened between us. And it was on Christmas Day that I knew my mother was getting ready to pass. She said, they've given me 2 months. I'll be dead in 2 months. And I said, well, Mom, I'm going to come, Jim and I are going to come. And she's like, no, I don't want you here. And I said, but Mom, you're my mom. I want to be with you. I want to come and help. And I didn't know any of this had happened yet. I didn't know all this betrayal stuff was happening behind the scenes. And so I show up on Christmas Day. I had driven all night to get there to be with her. And Jim had gone with me, and we were so badly treated. She didn't want to have anything to do with me. She wouldn't look at me. She was ordering my brother and his wife around, go get this, go get that. I need such and such, blah, blah, blah. And she was just doing busy work for them to not look at me, not have time with me, et cetera. And I was just like, what is going on here? And that night there was an episode that happened between my brother and I that just blew my mind. And I went back to this motorhome that we were in. It was a little motorhome that I'd bought, and I was thinking that I would travel around in this motorhome and teach, PSYCH-K classes in different cities and use that kind of as a portable, like a turtle, it would be my home.
Yeah.
And
I love that.
Around different places. Yeah. And that was our dream, that we were going to do that together, Jim and I. And
so Jim, I'm curious. So because you went to hypnotherapy with, right? And so when was PSYCH-K? Was that shortly?
Yeah. So hypnotherapy became a doorway. I spent about almost a year working on building a business, with hypnotherapy. Right. I moved to the Denver area because I was in Colorado Springs and Monument, and I just thought it was too conservative for that to be welcomed and embraced. So I thought, well, Denver is a much larger metropolis and, more openness, et cetera. I thought I would be better received here, but it didn't fly. But what happened, another awakening moment there was to wake up and realize if the marketing isn't working, then go a different path. And PSYCH-K showed up. And so that opened up my life there as well. And that's really where Spirit wanted me to be working. And so the hypnotherapy was the kind of like the prelude to get me into what I really needed to be doing. Yeah. And so PSYCH-K was a huge turning point for me as well. And I was really able to start taking on all of the important things that I needed to do, taking on personal responsibility for the life I was creating, and starting to learn that I needed to stand in my power even more than I had learned before that. It was like, do what I need to do to take care of me, and that's okay, you know. And it just, that same message that just kept going on and on, that I needed to take care of myself, stand in my power, stand up for myself. And so these betrayals happened, and Jim and I decided to get married, and we did that. And then we were only together for 12 years, and out of that time frame, his spiritual calling was to develop Alzheimer's. And so that was a really hard thing to go through as well, because he had said, there's going to come a day, this was early on when we had met, he's just said, I think there's going to come a day where I'm going to be counting on you, and I know you'll do what needs to be done. And I'm like, okay, you know, do you know what that means? He's like, no, I don't actually, but I know you'll do what's right. Well, as it turned out, that was going through this Alzheimer's journey together, and a powerful experience. Oh my God, to be able to keep working and doing everything I needed to do, make sure he was safe. I brought in a roommate to stay with us so that that other person would be eyes and ears for me when I was away. And as Jim's mental health diminished, I needed those eyes and ears. And it was a really incredible thing. I didn't know if I could do what needed to be done. That kept haunting me. It's like, how do I know what that's going to be? You know, and how will I know that I can actually do what needs to be done? Because, you know, I love this man and I don't want him to die. But it's like, I knew enough by that point. It's like, this doesn't have a happy ending. You know, the happy ending will be him letting go of his body. And I didn't know if I could do that. You know, I didn't know if I had the strength. And as it turned out, I did have the strength to do what needed to be done. And I, you know, dosed him with the morphine as he was letting go of his body. And there was another drug, I can't remember what it was, that helped minimize the anxiety that was developing as the physical body is dying. It's uncomfortable. And so he would have these rousings. I would say it was kind of like a rousing. And I laid beside him every night. We were at his daughter's house at this point. She offered to do hospice. And it was better that we did hospice there at her home, because the other children that he had were right there in the same vicinity, and they could come and go. And so we did that, because our home was quite a ways away. And it was the most amazing moment, truly, to be to witness and I stayed, like my grandmother, I wasn't there at her death. I was in the home, but I wasn't beside her. And I told Jim, I said, whatever it requires, you wake me up before you leave this earth. I want to be there. I want to be fully aware. I want to witness that with you. Mm. And I was ready. It's like, I can do this. You know, it wasn't easy, but it was truly an honor to be in his presence and to witness that last breath and to go, that was it. That was it. That was the last breath. And he had two other daughters that were there, the woman's house that we were in, and then another one of his daughters. And Anuschka, I don't know if you've ever had that opportunity, but wow, is it a powerful moment to realize, you know, we shed this skin, we shed this body. And I knew Jim's presence was there in the room. He was so fully present in the room, and I felt so held in that space and in that sacred moment. And it was, it's like, it's all okay. You know, it's all okay. I know that you're safe. I know that you're loved. I know that you're cared for on the other side. And there's no fear. There's no fear about death, because I could feel he was totally at peace. And it's like, okay. And he was an adventurer. Like, he lived a wild life, like a Paul Bunyan life, tall tales and all kinds of stuff. And to know that he was there was actually kind of some laughter. It's like, babe, let go. It's all good. I am totally fine here on this other side. It's good. So
it's really like that whole thing of true transition and knowing there's that transition and not pure like just death and that's it.
Yeah.
And that to me is so powerful. I haven't had the opportunity of being next to someone that has passed, but I have had the experience of that transition where the spirit is still in limbo, where I've experienced the spirit actually coming inside my physical body, which was a whole
that's a whole other thing.
Whole other thing. And I feel like that was like a true like, oh, like there is something after.
Oh yeah, there definitely is. And I have so much opportunity with people to help them understand consciousness through working with PSYCH-K, that there's different aspects of consciousness. I wouldn't call them levels. I would call them different aspects of consciousness. And we have our conscious mind and we have our subconscious mind. We are in touch with the superconscious mind, however people define that for themselves, whether they call it God or universe or spirit or, their higher self or whatever that would be. Mm-hmm. But there is consciousness, and we have that after we leave this body. And it's such a powerful experience to know that just because we take off this robe or we take off this body and we leave it behind, that everything is still there. All of us is still there. We're not losing anything, except maybe some of our limitations. We kind of awaken to a whole new level of ourselves. And that's important to know, that when we're in that dying process, to let go of the limitations of hanging on to earthly stuff, because that becomes a limitation in and of itself as well. And if we can't let go of the earthly stuff, that there's a part of us that's trapped in our attachment to whatever it is. So whether it's an attachment to a home, or it's an attachment to money, or it's an attachment to something, or even people. Mm-hmm. Attachments to people. We can't be truly free. We can go on and do our work, but there's that part of us that's like the thread. Yeah, it's like this thread of energy that could be more of a cable than a thread. And it can be very encumbering to the spirit, to the soul, to manage that. So
I did one time read somewhere that like our physical body is only 20% of us.
Oh,
so like
I'm going to say,
and maybe even less than that.
Yeah,
we truly are, right? Maybe it's like, 10, who knows? But there's so much more than this physical body, and our human self is so attached to the appearance of the physical body, and it's like you're so much more than that,
Yeah, truly. I think about it. It's like if I have a favorite outfit, or I have a favorite. I used to be really into costuming and helping people in theater and doing costuming. And I was a seamstress and I made lots of costumes and stuff. And it's like having that favorite costume. It's like, I'm wearing that costume. I'm wearing that costume. I love feeling dressed up in this costume. It's like, that's my body. So I got to let go of this costume and, go on to whatever's going to be next. And it's just the freedom, that comes with this other understanding. And I think that's one of the big things that PSYCH-K has truly helped me with, because I've worked with so many different people with different challenges, and they realize that the limitations that they are holding on to is really what's blocking them from the quality of life they want. And death is one of those things that we fear, we avoid, we don't want to talk about it, all those things. Mm-hmm. And I had my own opportunity to go through cancer, as you and I have talked. And so I'm so grateful to have had the opportunity to have had you in my life too.
And that wasn't a coincidence. It literally, that's like divine. I couldn't believe that we had literally just met.
Oh my God. Yeah. Because that was like, it was either in September or October. And then I think it was October.
I think it was October. Yeah.
And then I left just a few days after our workshop that you were in. Yeah. And I was on a flight to Australia with my new gentleman friend, my boyfriend. Now that's been about almost 2.5 years. And anyway, last year we took off in October, right after that class, and flew to Australia, which is where he's from. And I got to go meet his friends and remaining family. And but not the way we thought we were going to meet them. I was going for a 3-week vacation to Australia, Melbourne, and I got off the plane and I couldn't stop coughing. I was on the airplane, and you're up at really high elevations on those international flights, and I just couldn't stop coughing the whole flight from LA to New Zealand, and then New Zealand, Australia. I could not stop coughing, and I really had the flight attendants quite nervous. They thought I had COVID or something, and I was like, no, this is bad. I've had COVID. This is totally different. It's more like a different kind of a cough. Well, anyway, we landed, and 2 days later, I still couldn't stop coughing. So Lee said, I think we need to go to a clinic. I think you need to check in on this. So here comes the next wake-up call. Within a few days of that, I was diagnosed with lymphoma. And immediately, I freak out a little bit because my dad had died from lymphoma, and I'm like, oh my God, and they said stage 4. And if we don't treat you now, you will be dead within a couple of weeks. We can't keep draining your lungs. They were draining my lungs because my lower lungs were completely collapsed. There was no air getting in there because there was so much fluid in the pleural cavities where the lung tissue sits that I had the inability to breathe. And I was only breathing from the upper lungs, which are literally like, if you put your hands, just like right below your neck, you've got lung space here. That's all I was breathing with, and I just couldn't get breath. And so I was getting more and more panicky because I couldn't breathe. And they said, we can get you on a steroid. We can start draining the fluid. It'll take a few days for that to start dissipating, but we've got to get you started on chemo. There's no other option here. We don't have any other options. You've waited too long. And I said, what do you mean I've waited too long? And the woman that was my doctor said, well, had you come in earlier, we could have caught this earlier. And I'm like, I had no signs that I was having problems. Well, I did actually. I just didn't know it. I thought I was just gaining a little weight, getting a little round around my middle.
You were like inflamed. I remember you had like a lot of bloating during even the workshop. I remember that.
Yeah. And that's when I was really seriously getting ready.
It's like the body whispers, right? I guess one of those in mind, body, spirit, right? It's like the whisper, yeah. And now your body's like screaming.
So it was screaming, but I was still going, I'm just having digestive issues. I don't know what it is. It's probably enzymes. Meanwhile, I'm getting ready to die. And so I had to face one of my next biggest fears, which I would say was probably my next truly biggest fear, was not death, but chemo, because both my parents had done the chemo route. My dad had also done radiation. And I was like, chemo is deadly. Chemo is deadly. This is going to kill me. So with my PSYCH-K tools, I knew I had a choice. It's like, okay, how am I going to perceive this? This is what I'm being offered. This is what they say I have. They say that it will work, that the type of lymphoma I had was incredibly treatable. So they were giving me hope, thank goodness, about that. And they said, it's not harsh. It's not like what your dad would have gone through. It's different. And the type of lymphoma you had, because I never found out what his type was, he said, the type of lymphoma you have is incredibly treatable, and there's a very good chance that you'll live, many years after this. And I'm like, okay. So with that hope, then I literally took the bags of chemo, each bag of chemo, before I would allow them to infuse it into me. And I filled each of those bags. I held them to my heart, and I called in God's holy light, and I just infused. It's touching to think about it.
Of course.
It's literally just been a year ago. We are at a year. When I had the diagnosis. I was diagnosed on November 5th, and my first treatment was on November 10th. And I was not terrified, but I was not looking forward to this, because it's like, what the heck is going to happen? Is this working? Me infusing these bags with light and holding the truth that it can help me. It will help me. I will survive this. I will beat this. I will come and win. And
that's what I shared with you. That's what I would do with my oral chemo.
Yeah. And so I took that to note. I took that to heart, and I was like, I'm going to do this too. And I said, do only what you were designed to do and nothing else. Meaning, in my world, there's no harm. There's no harm that will come to my physical being other than what needs to be damaged, which were the tumor cells and the cancer. And so I held that prayer every moment of every day. And boy, that first chemo was a whopper. It really laid me flat for several days. And I went through Thanksgiving. My daughter was so panicked as she flew to Australia with a 4-month-old baby to come and be with me. And we had Thanksgiving together in this little Airbnb that Lee had rented. And oh my God. And it showed me that he was really devoted and cared so much for me and helped me through all of this, because we were navigating their medical system and I had no insurance there. It's like it was just crazy. All of this was crazy. And every step we took was like, what do we do next? What do we do next? How do we handle this? And it was divinely guided every step of the way. And to the point even that I knew, I said to God before I started the treatment, I said, God, tell me when. I want to know when I developed this, because I truly believe there's cause and effect.
Yeah,
and I said, I want to know when this happened. And the doctor had said probably 10 years ago. And I'm like going through my mind, 10 years ago, what was that? And that was back to that time frame where my dad and my mom, were in their dying processes and stuff. And so I went to bed that night there in the hospital, and I awakened the next morning with the answer. And I saw the moment that I developed this. And it was such a huge energy shift, Anuschka. It was me standing in front of that RV window. We had come back after taking showers at my grandmother's house, who had died years before, and my brother just being horrid to me. And I still did not consciously know that he and my mom had crafted this plan to betray me, but I sensed it. There was something that was wrong, deeply, deeply wrong. And energetically, I knew the betrayal had happened, but I didn't consciously know about it till weeks after my mom had died. And it was that moment. It was like I was standing there in the darkness in a parking lot close to the hospital where my mom, where my mom was at. And I had this like kaleidoscope explosion that happened, like in my mind's eye. There was this kaleidoscope explosion of color that happened. And it was in that moment that I understood something massive had happened in my energy field. And that was the moment that this happened. And so I said,
just so I can add a little bit. I know we're very familiar with, like, especially with PSYCH-K, that physical symptoms are messengers, right? Yeah. And one of the biggest things I'll always say is there's like that suppressed, repressed anger and resentment. Even when you were sharing earlier about the betrayal, I remember, like, literally I had this hit. I'm like, that was what was the anger and resentment that had been suppressed.
Yeah, the deep pain, deep pain, even though I didn't know what was going on. Yeah.
So repressed.
Repressed.
Because you had no awareness.
Yeah. And I thought I had handled it. I did a lot of forgiveness work with my mom after she had died, and did a number of psyche balances on her behalf.
What about with your brother then?
And I've done what I can with my brother as well. But it feels so unsafe to talk to him, and so dangerous, like emotionally dangerous to me. So I have said, until something changes within you where you will own what you did, your part in this. Not that it was his fear. It was his lack of planning and preparing in his own life that created a desperation in him to spin a wild story to get my mom involved in this wild story. So until he was willing to take ownership for that, I said, I am not willing to engage with you any further, because I can't trust you to not hurt me again. So I haven't spoken with him, except for, he did end up finding out, because my daughter had posted a thing in Facebook on her Facebook page, and my brother's wife had seen it, that I was in a hospital in Melbourne with cancer. And he called to let me know that one of our relatives had died, and left it at that. And I'm like, okay, I guess, thank you. So I didn't know what to say about that. But anyway, that's the only time I've spoken with him. And I've part of my cleanup work is to still, I'm working on exactly what it is I want to say to him. I'm going to write him a letter and be very clear in there about how this cancer developed, and not to blame him. That's my doing. The cancer developed within me. It was my energy shift that created that experience for me, but his part in that was the betrayal.
Yeah.
And so he gets to own that part for himself, and whatever he needs to do to clean that up. But I need to create finality with that relationship so that I'm done, and energetically I can be finished with it. So this past year has been about me really sorting out, what do I truly need to say? And I'm almost at the point, Anuschka, where I'm wondering if I've done so much of that, maybe all I need to say is, I wish you well. I'm kind of close to that. It's like, I don't know that he would even hear any of the other stuff. Yeah. And so, but with my transition with that, it's like I can open that doorway for his transformation if and when he's ready to do that, in whatever way it is, and have so much intention built into that experience that he gets the message loud and clear without the words, if that makes sense.
I was just going to say, now it doesn't necessarily have to be like actual words. It's sometimes, you see like in movies where it's literally like, I forgive you. And it's like, that's it. Like, and then he knows deep down what he did. That's going to eat him away.
Yeah.
Right. So it's
and that's part of what, that's part of what I would rather not happen for him, is that
totally,
if we could have this conversation, if we could have this opening where he would be transparent and truly vulnerable and embrace the actions that he took and his own fears about why he went there. Wow, that would be transformative for him. And I hope for him for that. But until this woman that's in his life, his wife, I think probably until she dies, I don't think he can get there, because she has a hold on him. And there's narcissism, big, deep narcissism going on in that relationship, I truly believe. And I think he is really held captive in that narcissistic energy trap that she has spun. So, he's got lessons in that to learn for himself as well.
It's his path, right? So
it is his path.
Everybody has their own path. So one of the things I would love to also talk about, being that your father also had lymphoma, and then, right? So a lot of times, we hear genetics, and we both know about epigenetics, right?
Yeah.
Dr. Bruce Lipton, I feel like, which by the way, those that are listening here, Karen has had the pleasure of not just meeting, but also interviewing. So
and what a joy
to meet him.
One of these days. Yeah. So do it sooner than later. That's all I can say.
Well, January, you're going to be here for that event. So,
I am. So, yes. And you're going to be there too?
I am. Yeah.
Okay. Let's get together and I'll take you up and introduce him.
Yes,
he is truly a genuine soul. And he is truly in his life as energetic, that Energizer bunny that goes back and forth across the stage. He's just filled with energy. He is such a dynamic being. So
I really believe he saved my life, just so you know. And I want to tell that to him, because that's like, and I'm going to get emotional, because that's how I learned about PSYCH-K. That's how I learned about epigenetics. And that's how I was like, nope, not me, watch me.
Yes, not me, watch me. Yes. Yeah. This is an important piece that you're talking about, is this whole thing about the genetic piece. We have been led down a pathway that science, and it's not even genuinely good science. And Bruce Lipton talks about this, that the whole genome project was just corrupt from the get-go. And out of that was spun a bunch of stories about how our genes are and what they do and blah, 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 blah. And he has such integrity. Bruce Lipton has such incredible integrity that he gave up his tenure at one university that he had, and then he was at Stanford, and he ended up leaving there because they blackballed him because he stood in his truth. And he was sleeping in the back of his car mean, he had some rough spots because he held to his integrity. And I love that about this man. It's like, I will not teach something that I know to be inaccurate. I will no longer do that. I refuse. There's the door, buddy, and he left. And that takes a lot of guts, to have that much integrity where you basically lose your life, not once, but twice, everything that you built up, and the regard of your colleagues that, now they look at you with, this.
Yeah, I was going to say reputation and all that. Yeah.
He gave up all of that, and he had to rebuild relationships. And, and look at where he's at now. He is adored by millions of people around the world.
Oh my gosh. I definitely am one of those.
Yeah, me too. I'm a groupie. But the message I want to come back to, which I think is where you were headed, is that we cannot allow ourselves to believe that genetics is what's running here. Because just because my dad had lymphoma and because my mom had breast cancer, that, oh my God, I'm going to be next. It doesn't work that way, guys. It only works that way if we believe in it.
Exactly.
And our beliefs can be so powerful that we will manifest that. For instance, my mom believed everything the doctors told her, everything. And the doctors told her, you have 2 months, maybe 2 months to live. And she was dead. Guess what? In 2 months. Yeah. Almost to the day.
That's why I say prognosis is like such a vicious cycle, because people believe it, and guess what happens?
Yeah. I'm working with a beautiful lady that it's not a client relationship. It's more of a blossoming friendship. And the day that I met her, she had not yet received a diagnosis. We were sitting on a back porch at this little coffee shop when the call came in from this doctor that said, you have cancer. It's breast cancer. That we had removed a tumor. They removed a tumor from her elbow, and they said, this is breast cancer. This doesn't look good, and she was having sores on her body and everything. And she's like, I bump into something and I start oozing and bleeding. And I knew she was in deep, deep trouble. I just knew she was in deep, deep trouble before the call even came in. And so I told her about my journey and what was going on. And I said, you know what? There is no one that has a right to tell you when you're going to die. No one has that right. And so she went to this oncologist appointment after that. And the doctor started to tell her her prognosis. And she said, do not stop. Do not tell me when I am going to die. You have no right to tell me. The only person that knows when I leave is God, and only God will tell me when it's time. So be quiet. And the woman was like, whoop, she buttoned up and said no more.
I did the same thing, by the way.
Yes. And I appreciate that about you too. And it's like these things, it's like claiming our power for ourselves. We have to claim our power, because if we don't, they will take our power. Yep. Not because they want to, but because they are unaware of what they're doing. It's so ingrained. It's like, well, you're going to die within 2 months. You're going to do this. You're going to do that. This is what's going to happen. It's like,
it's all statistics. Yeah. They go based on just statistics, completely ignoring individuality. Completely.
Truly. Yes.
And spirit.
And spirit. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And you know what? We can beat all of that. I'm in remission, and I have every part of me believing that I will be able to get my circulating tumor cells down to zero. The functional medicine person that I'm working with now said, well, I've only had 2 people that have actually taken it down to a 0 before. Most people get to a plateau and the cells are just kind of in a dormant state. And I said, well, you're looking at number 3.
Yeah.
And he's like, okay.
I don't use the word remission, by the way.
Okay. What do you use?
I just say I'm healed. I'm cured.
Yeah.
Because even remission.
Yeah. Leaves it hanging.
And if you actually look it up, like the words, it says, oh, there's a chance it will come back.
Yeah.
And so this is just how I coach people. Just don't even use the word remission.
Yeah. Thank you. That's a really great thought, because, I guess I was using it because so many people can identify with that. And they ask me, are you in remission? Are you in remission? I'm like, yeah, I am.
And I tell people, no, I don't use that word.
Yeah.
Immediately I'll say nope. And they're like, really? I'm like, yeah. I say I'm healed. I'm cured. Like, why would I even want to be still in the cancer? Because that still
Right.
puts you in the cancer world.
Yeah,
Right?
it does. You're
Anyhow,
right.
that's just
Thank you. Well, I appreciate that. Thanks, coach. Give me a little punch right there. I love it because your punches are soft. But it's a great thing to consider because I really hadn't thought much about that word. It was more like that was just a way of helping people connect with I'm in a place where I'm safe.
totally. It's just it's just what's common, right? It's just what's there and out there and
yeah. And there's so much we can do, guys. Oh my God, there's so much we can do. If you get the big C word diagnosis at some point, don't buy into it. It's energy can neither be created or destroyed. We transform energy.
Yep.
So it's all about transforming the energy. It got transformed in that moment where I had that kaleidoscope big explosion where my soul's energy felt this massive betrayal. And I know that was the moment it happened. I remember it so clearly. So my energy transformed at that moment. And that's when my system had this impact of knowingness. But I can transform that energy again and be back in a place where my energy is completely intact and whole and healed and just where I need to be. And it takes some time maybe for things to show themselves where there are no circulating tumor cells. And that's okay. I'm just working the plan. I know that I'm going to be right where I want to be. One of these days, not too far from here, I'll go do that blood test and it'll be at a 0.
Yep.
So
you're creating, that's what I always say. It's like, if we have the power to create the disease, we have the power to heal the same disease. And so
of course, and I love
doing the work.
Right. And that word disease is not like a decaying state. It's a dis-ease within the body. It's I'm not comfortable with this. And so even that is, if you break those two things apart, the DIS and the EASE, gives you a different perspective of looking at disease. And it's like, okay, so I'm just uncomfortable with something. I just need to shift that. Yeah. Let's do it.
Dis-ease or disharmony, right? It's similar. They're like
same thing.
Similar. So
yeah, absolutely. Because there's harmony in our body, and we just need to bring that harmony back into play. Yeah.
I love it.
I do too. So,
oh my gosh, this was amazing. Anything else that you wanted? I mean, of course, please also.
Yeah, I guess I wanted to share one of the things that my mom said to me that has really stuck with me before she passed. Is she said, you're like a cat. You just keep landing on your feet. And at first I was like, really, Mom? Like, that's what you want to tell me before you die? But you know what? It's true. It's true. And we can be like a cat. We just keep landing on our feet. It's like there's a resiliency in all of this. And that's important for us to understand, that we are resilient beings, and we just need to understand for ourselves, am I giving my power away, or am I claiming my power? Am I standing in my power, or am I let somebody else taking that from me? And I truly believe, Anuschka, that if we become aware, it is about our awareness. That's the first step. We have to develop awareness about where we're at before we can choose a different pathway to go down. If we don't realize what we're doing to ourselves, if we don't realize what thoughts we're thinking about ourselves, if we don't realize the limitations that we're placing on ourselves, we're not going to do anything about it, are we?
Yeah, we're not going to know what to do.
Awareness, awakening, your awakening piece is so huge in this. We must awaken to what we are creating. And if we have been creating it, we can recreate whatever we want. And that's where PSYCH-K is so powerful. It's about step by step, we just recreate what we desire for ourselves. And I'm so blessed, so blessed that I was led to find PSYCH-K. And I have helped so many people embrace these truths for themselves now. And it's like, I just rejoice every time somebody says, I want to come to a class and learn how to do this to help myself. I'm like, yes, that's the thing. Because if you've got the screwdriver and you've got the wrench and you've got your hammer and you've got whatever tools you like to have, it's like, man, I can go to town. I can hang pictures. I can knock out walls. I can do all kinds of stuff, with just simple tools. Anything is possible.
Anything is possible. I love that. And I mean, just to add with the cat thing, cats have 9 lives.
Yes, they do. I'm not counting those though. I'm not counting how many of those I've used up.
No.
I'm just going to keep landing on my feet.
Infinite. We'll say.
But true. Oh, it's been a joy to be with you.
Yes. Well, do you believe you've embraced life as a healing journey? Because that's what life is.
It is.
Continues on and on and on.
It does. And we keep healing new things that pop up. So it's all good. It's all good.
Well, please share with us how people can get a hold of you and find out more about your workshops and all the things.
Thank you for the opportunity to share that. You can find me at my website, and that is Subconscious Change. And let me spell that. It's SUBCONSCIOUS, and the word change, CHANGE.com. And it's been up for 14 years now, and it's gone through several revisions. So I hope you guys like the new revision that it's in. I've got workshops coming up. I start people off at the basic because that's it's like building blocks. We build on different layers. And the basic is truly a place where you learn what to do and how to help yourself. And it's the basic building blocks, but we use them all the time. In fact, most of the time those are the tools we use. So for creating changes in our lives. So you can go there. If you want to talk to me, I'm happy to pick up a phone call from you. 719-648-3070 is my phone number. And of course, that's in the US. So you add a +1 if you're outside the country. And my email address is simply Karen, Karen @subconsciouschange.com. But make sure you spell subconscious correctly, because if it's off a letter, you won't get me. You won't get me. But anyway, I appreciate this opportunity, Anuschka. Thank you so very much. And thank you for also being in my back pocket as I was going through my cancer discovery and journey, because I thought of you so many times. And you also contacted me, as I was going through it too. And it was just so beautiful to know that you were there as one of my angels helping me along this path. So thank you for all of your encouragement and all that you do to help other people.
Thank you.
So greatly appreciate it. Yeah.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. I truly was thinking about you so much. And I kept thinking this is not a coincidence, because I do remember you being very anti-chemo.
Oh, yeah.
And then it was as if I was divinely put into your life to say, hey, you know what? It doesn't have to be that.
Right.
And so thank you, Karen. I really am honored to have you on Life as a Healing Journey podcast.
Oh, thank you too, Anuschka. I appreciate you so much. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Life is a Healing Journey podcast. You are here to peel and heal one layer at a time, to live your life to the fullest in the face of any circumstance, while embracing a life filled with love, joy, and peace. If you are in disharmony in any area of your life and truly desire to be in harmony and committed to elevating your health and well-being, I'm one click away. Find me at healingwithanuschka.com. And remember, that's Anuschka with a C. And if you like what you heard, please subscribe and share this podcast with your loved ones. Get your healing on. Until next time.